Twitter co-founder Biz Stone has a new book out, appropriately called Things a Little Bird Told Me. Now, he opens up about the roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship, and he gives some advice for people along for that ride. There was one chapter in the book that kind of stuck out to me. It was a number. It was $500 million. You randomly came up with a number in the car on the way to meet Mark Zuckerberg.
The biggest
number
I could think
you
of.
could think of. So tell me a little bit about, I mean, how on earth did you decide that that was it?
I got into work, and Jason Goldman said, "Go downstairs. Evan's waiting for you in his car." And I said, "Okay." I went down there, and I got in the car, and I said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "We're going to Palo Alto." And I said, "What are we? Why?" And he said, "Well, we're going to meet with Mark Zuckerberg." And I said, "We are? What about?" And he was like, "We're going to talk to him about, partnerships." And so we're driving along in the car, and I'm thinking like, well, but do we want to sell the company? Evan's thinking, no. And so then I'm like, well, but we're going to have this meeting now. Like, what happens if like it comes to it? What happens if he just says like straight up, how much? And I said, well, I have an idea. If we don't actually want to sell the company, why don't we just come up with a number that is so ridiculously high that there's absolutely no way anyone would say yes. And Ev said, well, what number? And I couldn't. I was sort of bubbling with laughter. I couldn't even get it out. I said $500 million. It was the biggest number I could think of. We laughed so hard we couldn't breathe. We sit down. Mark says, I don't like to talk about numbers. And Evan says, well, neither do we. And Mark says, but if you say a number right now, I will tell you yes or no. And then Evan looks at me and looks back at Mark, and he says, $500 million? And Mark takes a beat and says, that's a really big number. And then I said, you said you say yes or no. It turns out they came up with the offer, and it was like mind-boggling.
What is the biggest misconception, do you think, of entrepreneurs starting to build a company?
I think the biggest misconception is that the entrepreneurs are these heroes that sort of dream everything up and then do everything by themselves, and that's just absolutely not true. You can't do that all by yourself. It's a team effort.
You say that the problem is, unless you're willing to accept the worst case scenario, you can't achieve the best case scenario. Now, that seems to be a mantra of entrepreneurs. What's behind that?
I was advising a startup years ago, and I realized that they were asking me for advice. One of them didn't want to move to San Francisco. I said, you know what? If you guys are going to do this, you really are just going to have to quit everything else and do it.
How do you deal with the stress? And you've started all over again to deal with stress with a whole new company. How do you deal with that?
If you have this emotional connection to what you're doing and you really believe in it, all of these naysayers, it's like water off a duck's back. You really believe in it, and you can get through the lowest lows.